Have you ever walked into a room and felt like every pair of eyes was a spotlight tracking your every move? Maybe you spent 10 minutes worrying about the way you walked past a group of strangers, or you've replayed a minor stumble in a conversation for 3 days straight, convinced everyone is still thinking about it. In modern internet culture, we've given this a very specific name, the horror of being perceived. But in the world of clinical psychology, we've been studying this for decades under a different label, the spotlight effect. Today, we're going to look at why your brain lies to you about how much people are watching, the evolutionary glitch that makes us hyper-aware of our own existence, and how to finally step out of the light and into the freedom of being a background character. To understand why we hate being perceived, we first have to look at the psychological construction of the self. Most of us live our lives as the protagonists of our own movies. We are the only people we are with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because we are so focused on our own internal experience, our thoughts, our insecurities, our messy hair, or our slightly awkward phrasing, we fall into a cognitive bias called egocentrism. We mistakenly assume that because we are hyper-focused on ourselves, everyone else must be too. The spotlight effect is essentially a failure of perspective taking. We forget that everyone else is also the protagonist of their own movie, far too busy worrying about their own spotlight to notice the flicker in yours. There was a famous study conducted at Cornell University that perfectly illustrates this. Researchers asked students to wear a cringy or embarrassing t-shirt, specifically one with Barry Manilow's face on it, and walk into a room full of their peers. Afterward, the students wearing the shirts were asked to estimate how many people noticed the shirt. They guessed about 50%. In reality, only about 23% of people even remembered the shirt was there. This gap between our perception and reality is where the anxiety of being perceived lives. We are constantly overestimating our own social visibility by more than double.
But why does being seen feel like a threat instead of a compliment? For the introverted or the socially anxious, being perceived feels like being judged in real time. This is rooted in evolutionary psychology. For our ancestors, being seen by the tribe was a high-stakes game. If the tribe noticed you were weak, strange, or incompetent, you risked social exclusion. And in the Pleistocene era, social exclusion was a death sentence. Your brain hasn't quite caught up to the fact that a stranger at a coffee shop isn't a tribal elder who can exile you to the wilderness. To your amygdala, being perceived equals being evaluated, and being evaluated equals potential danger. This is further complicated by the Gen Z phenomenon of the digital spotlight. We are the first generations in history to grow up with a literal perception machine in our pockets. Social media has trained us to view our lives through a third-person lens. We don't just eat a meal, we see ourselves eating a meal. We don't just go for a walk, we curate the vibe of the walk. This has led to a psychological state called self-objectification, where we constantly monitor our appearance and behavior from an outsider's perspective. When you say you hate being perceived, what you're often saying is that you're exhausted from the mental labor of trying to control how other people see you. There's a concept in sociology called the looking glass self. It suggests that our sense of self isn't built from who we actually are, but from who we think other people think we are. If you struggle with the spotlight effect, your looking glass is likely distorted. You aren't seeing yourself, you're seeing a version of yourself filtered through your own harshest insecurities. You assume that if you feel awkward, you must look awkward. In psychology, we call this emotional reasoning, the false belief that because you feel a certain way, it must be an objective reality.
So, how do we turn the spotlight off? The first step is what we call the invisible man experiment. Next time you're in public, instead of focusing inward on your own performance, turn your attention outward. Look at the people around you. Really look at them. Are they staring at you? Most of them are looking at their phones, staring into space, or talking to someone else. By shifting your focus from how do I look to what do I see, you break the egocentric loop. You realize that you aren't a performer on a stage, you're just another person in the crowd. Another powerful shift is embracing the freedom of being unimportant. Many overthinkers find the idea of being unimportant insulting, but in reality, it is the ultimate psychological liberation.
If you are unimportant to the strangers around you, you are free. You are free to make mistakes, to have a bad hair day, or to stumble over your words, because those moments will be forgotten by others within 30 seconds. Most people are socially myopic. They can't see much further than their own immediate needs and worries. Once you accept that you aren't the main character in anyone else's story, the weight of being perceived begins to lift. Finally, we have to address the core shame that often fuels the spotlight effect. If being perceived feels like being caught, ask yourself, what am I afraid they will see? Often we hide because we believe that if people look too closely, they'll see that we're faking it or that we don't belong. This is imposter syndrome mapped onto social life. Healing this requires radical self-compassion. It requires accepting that being seen as imperfect is actually the only way to build genuine connection. You can't be truly loved if you are never truly perceived. The horror of being perceived is a survival mechanism that has overstayed its welcome. Your brain is trying to protect you from a judgment that, in most cases, isn't actually happening. You aren't standing under a spotlight. You're standing in a world of billions of people, all of whom are just as worried about their own Barry Manilow t-shirts as you are. If this perspective helped you feel a little less exposed today, consider subscribing to join our community. We're all learning how to navigate the complexities of the human experience together. And if you're curious to dig even deeper into the why behind your behaviors, click on the video on your screen right now to uncover more about why you do what you do. Thanks for watching.